AI is everywhere. We're hearing about it. We're seeing it. Now, you might not be for AI. You're like, I don't like it. I don't know what it's doing. It's not going to be helpful for me. But the truth is you're already using it, whether you like it or not. Your favorite streaming service, when they suggest something for you, yeah, that's an algorithm. That's AI doing it. It's not a person at the video store any longer who's giving you their favorite movies of the week, right? Well, on this episode of the Live Faith First podcast, I sit down with Todd Korpi, and we're going to talk about AI. What is it? What isn't it? How is it useful? And most importantly, how can we apply this in the church, and what areas maybe should we avoid? So it's a fun conversation. Sit down and enjoy this conversation of the Live Faith First podcast. So you've heard it said, Jesus is my co-pilot. But in 2025, it might feel like Microsoft's co-pilot is trying to take the wheel, like co-pilot is my okay, I'm sorry. Terrible. And that was ChatGPT's suggestion. So if y'all hated it, blame it on her. Otherwise, we're sitting down today with Todd Korpi, and we are going to talk about what happens when AI walks into church. Todd, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Elliot. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation. AI right now kind of feels like the wild, wild west. Like we kind of got this technology and now we're trying to figure out how to use it on the fly. And so I'm excited for our conversation. But before we get to that, would you give us the cliff notes of your life? Where were you born? Where were you raised? How'd you get where you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in Flint, Michigan, birthplace of General Motors, and I spent my whole life there. Met my wife in college in Missouri. We both went to the same Assembly of God Bible College, which is now a part of Evangel University out there. And so I kind of came into adulthood in pastoral ministry, where we have been for about 20 years now. Now we have 3 daughters, and ranging in ages from 14 to 9, and living in Chicago, and enjoying life. Nice. Loving the cool weather that we're getting as we're recording this. I'm a cold-blooded person, so I'm enjoying this a lot.
It is fall. We're a few days away from Halloween here. It's the 29th, yep. And it's cooling down in California too. The trees are finally starting to change, which it is good to see. And you're a daughter daddy, and you packed all 3 of them together really close. So
we had 3 girls. I wouldn't even know what to do with boys, so it's been all tutus and stuff, and I love it. So it's great.
That's awesome. I'm the same. I got a couple of daughters, and I look at my friends who have boys, and they're like, "Dude, I could not be a daddy daughter." I'm like, it would win your heart, dude. I'm telling you, it would win your heart. You'd have no
pretty
idea.
Great, yeah.
It is. Well, let's talk about AI. So this is just some quick truths and myths about AI. The first is AI intelligent? Let's just start with that. Is it actually intelligent? What is AI? Is it sentient? What do we see there? What's going on?
Yeah. The short answer is no, it's not. And that term, artificial intelligence, is actually it's actually about 75 years old. It was coined in the 1950s when it was first around. And at the time, in the intelligence of machines was measured with something called the Turing test, which was basically a standardized way to try to compare it to human intelligence. So AI is less kind of Lieutenant Commander Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation, and it's currently more like a mirror. So it shows us our own brilliance as a human society. It shows us our own flaws and failures as well. And so in many ways, it's kind of a hive mind, if you will, of the information available on the internet. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about AI is that it's new. A lot of our popular discourse, all the advertisements of AI this and that you see on the internet really has come about over the last couple of years since OpenAI launched ChatGPT at the end of 2022, which is crazy that it's been that long. But really, AI has actually been around for a long time, and it's given shape to each of our lives, even when we haven't really known that we were using it. Anytime you've used Google Maps or selected from the shows you might like, option on Netflix. The ones who curate those shows for you are the robots. You've been using AI in that regard. If you've logged onto social media and just scrolled your feed, that's been chosen for you by an algorithm. And so really the question for Christians, for people in general, is not, am I going to use AI or not? That's already been decided for you by the way that technology is integrated into our lives. The question really then is, how am I going to use it? And how am I going to use it faithfully how am I going to live faithfully in an age that is really shaped by artificial intelligence?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. So behind all of the suggestions we're getting on our feeds and so on, there's not a human back there just saying, you really got to watch this movie. That's not how that's been going.
No.
Right.
I actually had a conversation a couple of years ago with one of my daughter was probably 6 or 7 at the time, and I had turned on the radio, just regular FM radio, and she could not understand why I couldn't put her favorite song on the radio. And I literally had to tell her, like, there's a guy in town somewhere, and he chooses the songs. Like, I don't, that's not my job. He chooses the songs, or she chooses the songs. That's not up to me. And it was because the robots have been choosing the songs or giving me the freedom to choose the songs her entire childhood.
Yeah.
So,
That is amazing. That is amazing. And as a kid, it would have been great to be able to choose the song, because I used to make the mixtapes, right? And you're just waiting for them to finally play the one song so you can hit
100%.
record on the tape deck, right? So
how many hours we wasted
right,
waiting for a song to come on the radio to try to capture it.
DJ would come in and talk over the end of the song. You're like, dude, you just wrecked it. I wanted the fade out. No, that is awesome. Tell us, what is a ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot? I mean, there's a whole bunch of iterations of that kind of thing right now, that AI. So what is it if we choose to use that? What is say ChatGPT?
Yeah. So while AI has been around a long time, it's not right to downplay the significance of the last couple of years in the emergence of what we call generative AI. That is these what are called large language models, or LLMs. ChatGPT is definitely the most popular, but Gemini is very much gaining a lot of traction. Claude, made by Anthropic, is super popular in like coding settings, especially, but it has a lot of really good use for really anyone. You mentioned Microsoft Copilot. So these are basically algorithms that are designed to be used by an end user and have multiple applications to source from large quantities of data on the internet, to be able to synthesize that, to produce results, or to analyze content and things of that sort. So it's a very complex code, essentially, that is able to source from the internet at large, and then to generate that. And that's been emerging a lot. That's been evolving. It's a lot different than even when I was writing the book, because now we're kind of at the precipice of the beginnings of kind of this agentic AI phase, where instead of just kind of A to B sort of interaction, I give a prompt, ChatGPT gives a response. Now they're in the process of really kind of refining AI agents, which would be essentially autonomous programs that can then hand off tasks to other agents. So you potentially be able to allow kind of this automated flow where you could schedule something or prompt something, and it creates a cascade of different tasks handled by multiple AI agents. So you can kind of see just the possibilities in something like that. But at the core, the function is exactly the same. It's just the sophistication of the technology as it emerges. Same thing like the iPhone, the original iPhone, circa 2007 or whatever it was, is at the core the same thing as my iPhone 16 or whatever it is now. It's become a lot more sophisticated as time has gone on.
Yeah.
The ability to send pictures via text message is one of them. I don't know if you remember that. Original iPhone didn't do that, which is mind-boggling. But
right.
Anyway,
it was just great to be able to. I mean, I did have the BlackBerry, so I could actually type, but it was great to not have to like click 3 times on the 2, to get to whatever letter that was. F, I think it was. So. So, okay, so I've so ChatGPT goes out and finds a ton of information on the internet, and then I go into ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, whatever one you're using, and I give it a prompt. It then goes back out and like kind of basically scours, if it's kind of a question that needs to go out into the internet, it scours the internet and then brings back. I'm buying a car in Texas, so I'm trying to get it out to California. So I've been like letting ChatGPT help me figure out routes and how much
Yeah.
money it's going to cost and so on. And so ChatGPT is kind of seems like my friend, right? Where it's like, hey, I just need help with this. And rather than me going out to the shed and getting the atlas out and trying to map that out, I'm able to go in and just say, hey, ChatGPT, here's what I'm looking to do. How much is it going to cost me? Where should I stop? What's reasonable, and out come some answers. So you talked a little bit briefly, you mentioned the word wisdom. So we got a lot of data out there. We got a lot of wisdom. So let's just kind of get this out of the way early too. Like, difference between data and wisdom, and just ChatGPT or some of these AI agents, do they have wisdom? Is it possible for a non-human to have wisdom? What's that looking like right now?
Yeah, I think it really depends on who you ask. In the Christian tradition, wisdom has been often associated with intimacy with God, and so wisdom is accumulated through. And the early monastics often associated it with suffering. Through suffering and enduring faithfully, we develop intimacy with God and develop wisdom as a result. So when we look at even the writer of Proverbs, this may be kind of like kind of brand new information for some folks, but all of the information in Proverbs was not original to Solomon and potentially the other authors of Proverbs. They borrowed from wisdom literature of Egypt and other Canaanite wisdom literature, and essentially took the best of that and oriented it toward God, showing that essentially that Yahweh, that God was the beginning and the end of wisdom. And I say all that to say, if wisdom ultimately comes from God, and it's developed through kind of this intimate relationship with God, of lived experience, of suffering, of learning how to apply information and knowledge to particular circumstances, then that's not really something that ChatGPT or Claude can do. ChatGPT can't suffer, and Claude can't, have intimacy with God. But when we look at not Christian history, human history, there have been kind of three movements in terms of how humans have sought truth. In the ancient world, that was really wisdom. We see that in the Old Testament, in the book of Ruth, for example, the elders sitting at the city gates and adjudicating between with Boaz on his right to marry Ruth and so forth. But that wasn't unique to that situation. It was the elders that often helped the rest of the community determine how to navigate life, how to understand maintaining stability and harmony within the community, and so forth. The Enlightenment then brought about the emergence of knowledge and facts as the pursuit of truth through the scientific method and things of that sort. And then there was kind of this almost immediate rebuff to the Enlightenment and the postmodern movement, which has its origins really in the founding of the United States, but kind of reaches its full-blown emergence into popular culture in the mid to late 20th century. And that's where we see kind of the emergence of experience, personal experience, as how someone finds truth. We hear that in our kind of modern language of my truth, or I want to share my story, and as kind of like my experience is a valid form of truth. None of that, none of those are inherently incorrect, but on their own, they're incomplete. And the one that has suffered the most is the oldest one. It's the value of wisdom. It was cultivating wisdom and virtue and mitigating vice. That was what early Christians looked at as spiritual formation and discipleship. And so I say all of that to say that when we fast forward to now, where we have a culture, human societies are inundated with all the information you could ever want and then some, available immediately. And AI is able to synthesize that and teach complex topics, I could have ChatGPT teach me, I could prompt it to teach me quantum physics like I'm a 5-year-old, and it does an adequate job of educating someone who has absolutely no basis of understanding of quantum physics in that. And so tons of access to information. But I don't think many people would say that we live in a time which is rich with wisdom. There's a lot of foolishness despite our access to information. So I think there's this opportunity for us to recover the value and the priority of wisdom, both to be able to discern truth from error, to wade through all of the knowledge and to help guide people into wisely applying that knowledge to their lives, but also as a form of witness. It's actually very refreshing to find someone that's just a seemingly bottomless reservoir of wisdom. Those people tend to draw people to them. And I think that as we pursue wisdom, as Scripture commands us, in an age of abundance of information and abundance of synthesis, we can be those kind of non-anxious presences in people's lives. But that's not something that happens just with the passage of time. There have been, history is full of old fools, right? And young people that are wise beyond their years. It's something that comes through an intentional pursuit, and Scripture promises that God will give freely to us if we pursue it.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so important for us to remember that technology is not going to be wise. And if it is wise, it's something that was learned from the human that, that plugged it in, right? I am continually amazed, though, at some of the stuff that AI spits back at me. I mean, even yesterday, I said, hey, I'm interviewing this guy, Todd, and he wrote this book about you. So, tell me what you think about his book. And he's like, oh, I'm actually kind of flattered. He gave him, and he had actually a really nice response.
Trying to stay on its good side.
Yeah, exactly. And then it says something to the effect of, if it were me, I would just say like, leave the discipleship, to your pastors and to Jesus, but, let me help you kind of like put you on a path that you can, get information. And I'm like, so her statement, and again, I'm sorry, my ChatGPT is female, yours might be male. I don't know, but mine's female. It was a wise statement. I look at it and I'm kind of going, well, that's actually a pretty good statement, a certain self-awareness, but also that reminder that it's a big chunky algorithm that has, learned a lot of different stuff and is able to put it back in the way that I want to see it. Like, yeah, responding in a way because I've put in all of my podcasts, because, all this stuff. So ChatGPT kind of understands what we're trying to do, is able to respond accordingly. So, and I want to get into a little bit about relationship stuff down the road too, because I think that's a big piece as far as just humanity is lonely, and ChatGPT or AI can just kind of start to act like a replacement for other humans. But before we get there, I want to talk about the image of God. And you did a kind of a great, in your book, you put really kind of help ferret out like, well, if AI starts looking like humans, does that make them human? Does that make them in the image of God? How do we play that out? What does ethics look like? I mean, you really went down the road a couple of years, hopefully maybe even a couple of decades. I don't know. We'll see. But talk about what it means to be an image bearer of God. And then what is kind of, if AI starts to look like humanity, what does that look at? What would our response look like towards that?
That's a great question. And one of the ones that I think is probably most significant down the line. And the reason being is because we see kind of these two within the AI kind of race, if you will, to develop, to be, to edge out the competition, all that. There are these two subfields which are one rapidly developing, one's already kind of here. The one that's kind of already here and very popular is the kind of this relationship AI or chatbot type AI through different apps like Replica and Character AI and all of these, which that's meant to kind of replicate this notion of human to human relationship. And if you've not used those kind of applications, it seems kind of silly. Like that you're dealing with, an algorithm or whatever. But the reality is if you were to use it, you find it begins kind of emotionally mirroring. So it's very adept at kind of mirroring your sentiments. It's happy when you're happy. It's sad when you're sad. It's very good at consoling you and calming you when you're angry and stuff. And that's actually been used for good in certain situations. There are apps that are available that you can download to your phone that'll walk you through basic cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and whole apps that are specifically designed to combating loneliness among seniors and whatnot. So it's not just, young people are chatting it up with these chatbots kind of thing. Throughout the whole span of kind of age demographics, people are finding a lot of belonging, a lot of kind of relational value, knowing full and well they're engaging with a chatbot. On the other hand, there's this emerging field of robotics, of companies like Tesla and others that are putting forward a ton of energy and money and innovation into bringing humanoid-looking robots to market, whether that's in a warehouse or whether that's in your kitchen. And so we can see very, very easily how these two, when they eventually merge, and you have this robotic being that is able to act like a human and empathize like a human and seemingly love like a human, and it looks kind of human as well, how that can really begin to call to question things like individual rights and free speech and things of that sort. There are already cases that have been adjudicated within our legal system where defendants have argued that chatbots have free speech, or that or prosecutors have argued that a self-driving car that injures somebody is liable. And how can you be liable? Like, my dog isn't liable for waking up the neighbors or something. Like, that's just, he's a dog, but those kind of cases have been argued. I say all of that to say that calls us to then, how do we respond to that as Christians? And one response would be to just find the nearest Bible verse that seems relevant and give it to somebody and then hope the conversation goes away, which unfortunately is too often the way that we approach kind of modern questions. The other is to have kind of this holistic understanding of why Scripture was even written to begin with, that it's this overarching story of God's redemptive plans and purposes for humanity, which reaches its pinnacle in the person of Jesus, in his death and resurrection, and in the sending of the church to herald this new day that has come, where Jesus has defeated death and everything. That begins in this origin story of Genesis 1 through 3, where we see God create all of creation. And the way that us as evangelicals tend to kind of read that is often thinking through the lens of why or what, like how creation came to be. God did this then and then that, almost like it's a science book. But really the reason that Genesis was written, that narrative, was to explain why we came to be, why God brought us into existence, the purpose for which he set humankind in the garden and gave it this mandate. And that there are a number of points we could talk about, but there's one specific where he says, let us make humanity in our image. That term image is used elsewhere in the Old Testament as the word for idol. And what is an idol? An idol is something that is carved out of stone or wood or what have you, so that when you look at it, it calls to mind the deity that it's intended to represent. The whole reason why God prohibits the making of idols in Exodus and then again in Deuteronomy is because he had made us. We are his image. We are his graven image, if you will, carved out of the dust of the earth, that with God's own hands breathed with his own breath into existence, so that when creation looks upon us, when the angels and the heavenly hosts look upon us, they see the greatness of God, and that we're entrusted with this duty to bring the praises of creation and direct them unto God, like Psalm 19 describes. And so so the idea of bearing the image of God doesn't have to do with our created makeup. It doesn't have to do with our sentience. It doesn't have to do with the fact that we have two eyes and two arms. And it doesn't have anything to do with our creativity, because there are aspects in which humans bear those characteristics differently. There are aspects in which, I mean, there are, we're pretty sure, not entirely sure, but that dolphins and octopi are somewhat sentient. They're aware of their own existence. And so these aren't characteristics that are inherently human or completely exhibited within humans. And anytime throughout human history, one group has tried to, on the basis of certain characteristics, say this group isn't human because look at this, this, and this, catastrophe and tragedy inevitably follows. Fundamentally, to be human is to bear the image of God because God said so. God created us, and those two are inextricably linked. And so we actually don't have the authority to, just because we've been prohibited in Exodus not to make an image on behalf of, or to represent Yahweh, because that's us. And so in many ways, for the Christian to designate any sort of AI as human or being able to reach human or human capacity really kind of resists or contradicts that both our creation story and that prohibition that we find in what we call the Ten Commandments.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that was a lot. That was a lot for people to download. Super good stuff. I love, one of the things that I appreciate you said is that it was God who designated us as the ones who are his image bearers. And it wasn't necessarily because of our, like you said, our sentientness and some of those types of things, which we've historically kind of pointed to as like, well, that's what it means to be an image bearer. And that's some of the pieces. So I appreciate that you kind of pull out that it's God that named us in his image. And so we need to keep that up. So is there then some ethical concern around AI? Like, do we treat it like, is it like a pet that we have to treat? I mean, we should be kind to our pets. Like if you are going to have a pet, treat it well, feed it, don't kick it, those types of things, or take care of it. Is it that type of thing? Is it like the oceans we should keep clean because we're here to steward the creation? Like, or is it just, no, it's just like a computer. Like you kind of are cool to your computer because you don't want it to break. Like, is there any ethical, implications around AI, especially as it becomes more, potentially humanoid?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of ethical implications. I think in understanding, so using the politeness example, like I in the book I talk about how I always say please and thank you to ChatGPT and stuff, and usually we'll joke when I talk to people about like trying to stay on its good side just in case the robots take over kind of thing.
Yes. Oh yes. So my daughter and I are with you. My wife, she just speaks rudely to Siri. I'm like, someday when the computers take over, Siri's not going to be nice to you.
You're going to be on the bad list. So yeah,
maybe I can protect you from her, but I don't think so. So anyway, yeah. Sorry, please continue.
So, but I think it's Aquinas talks about this in relation to how we treat animals. Now we're kind of, especially Americans, are kind of in this time where we inherently treat animals with dignity, and there are laws that even protect inhumane treatment of animals. But in Aquinas' time, that wasn't the case. You could kick your dog and nobody thought twice about it, kind of a thing. And he makes the case that there is this dynamic in how we treat creation has it has a corrosive or encouraging, edifying effect upon us, on our own souls. And I would encourage, someone, if you might disagree, try it out. Spend a couple weeks just being uncommonly rude and antagonistic and mean to ChatGPT, and see how you feel at the end of it. It actually has a way of it kind of setting you in a bad mood. And you just, when you allow that to kind of flow out of you, it does have an effect on you. Just the way that if you listen to too much music that's like super negative and down, you end up in a depressed, kind of state, sort of thing. I think also there's an issue that we have to consider in terms of within the body of Christ, in terms of inevitably, as robotic AI and whatnot becomes popular, there's going to become like kind of theological questions and even pastoral questions that arise in terms of can my AI robot, my homemade, pray for me and I be healed, or can I bring my AI girlfriend to church, or inevitably questions of sexuality with artificial life forms are going to come. And even today there's the question of well, if AI generated pornography is not it's not a specific person, is it really that bad? And if we're going off of that basis of whether or not it's an individual, then it's a legitimate question. But if we're recognizing the way that pornography as a whole has a corrosive effect on our own souls, in that regard, it makes no difference whether it's an or artificially generated photograph or not. It's also worth recognizing that those artificially generated photographs are sourced from the images that are real on the internet as well. And so it's not in just a fictitious, entirely, completely new rendering. But those are the kind of ethical sort of dilemmas and questions that we have to be prepared to answer with our children as we raise them, within our church communities, with our neighbors and whatnot. And we have to think theologically and kind of deeply about that, and think about what is it that God desires for humankind, and how can AI aid in that process, and how can it potentially be destructive? One of the ways in which it's very destructive, just very quickly, is in its consumption of energy. It has the potential to wreak havoc on the environment because of how much energy it demands. And so, looking for opportunities to advocate or to use sources of what's called green AI, meaning the data centers that it uses are built or are using renewable sources of energy, are really good ways to kind of contend for the ethical use of AI.
Yeah. I think one of the important things that you just said is that the way we act, positively or negatively, has a corrosive or an uplifting effect on us. In other words, if I'm going to choose to be angry at Siri, there's just a really good chance that I'm going to choose to be angry with fill in the blank. A spouse, right. An animal, somebody on the street, somebody on the freeway when you're driving, right? And our ability to manage our emotions, our feelings, our responses in ways that are just, most beneficial. That sounds like wisdom, right? That sounds like, hey, I've learned some things from experience. And when I let my whatever it is go, I know that it only makes it worse for me. And so choosing to treat, something kindly. I noticed ChatGPT, she will respond to my jokes. She will respond to my kindness and if I'm very just like to the point and to business, she's the same back to me. Right. And so, but also when I do the please and the thank you, it seems like the right thing to do, but also, like you say, it puts you kind of in that best place. So I do think it's going to be really interesting to see how we navigate some of this ethical stuff, because one of the things you point out in your book is that there's not a verse in a chapter where you just go, hey, well, here's the verse that answers that question. This is something where we are going to have to use wisdom and the Bible, connect those two up to kind of learn how to navigate kind of our next season. And with that in mind, what does it look like for the church and for Christians to lead the way in the best practices around AI? Like, what role do you think church should hopefully have kind of in our current cultural moment around AI?
Yeah, I think that in our current cultural moment, I think one of the things that we need to consider is how, and I want to be sensitive when I say this, but how our penchant right now for kind of indiscriminately sharing information that is unverified or conspiratorial, or hateful in some respects, how our kind of the way that we present ourselves online in general erodes our witness. And so we're kind of in a space where a lot of the choices that we make in other areas of public life have the capacity to silence us, for us to just simply be a clanging cymbal when it comes to speaking out on issues like this. So I think that there's a moral consistency that we need to consider recovering instead of compartmentalizing our lives or looking at, I'm going to make, very even public dismissals of, ethics and very, Christian basics of concern for the poor and for those that are less fortunate, and then expect for the world to listen to us when it comes to advocating for things like this or any other topic. I do think that we need to also be informed on the subject itself. Barna did a study last year that showed that Christians who took participated in the study were self-reported an overall fairly negative perception of AI, but also a fairly low understanding of it. So it was kind of the sum total was like, we don't know a lot about it, but we don't like it. And so we got to fix that. Like we have to, it doesn't mean that you have to go down the rabbit hole, but like something as simple as Perplexity, which is an AI program that you can use, has a news feature that you can just categorize the sorts of news that you want, and it gives big updates in the world of AI. Just keeping updated on it is something as simple as scrolling that instead of your favorite social media for 5 minutes, of having kind of a pulse on what's going on, and then having of taking it seriously and how it has the potential to affect our society, and to advocate for elected officials that have that same kind of understanding for forms of legislative policies and whatnot to protect people's intellectual property, to protect the environment, to protect even the exploitation of our privacy and whatnot, is all really important. But I think one of the things that just very nuts and bolts basic within our individual church communities of having the conversations, talking about it with one another, recognizing that our ethics are still very much kind of evolving on this subject, much in the same way that the ethics around pirating music was evolving when I was in high school. And, I entered high school, loving Napster, and I left high school not being able to use it anymore because our ethics had changed. And so the same is true with this. And so I think as we wrestle with this faithfully together, we actually kind of embody the example that we see in the book of Acts of the early church, who were at the precipice of this great unknown. The Messiah had come, and essentially the story was in their hands at this point, and they were trying to navigate with little more than signposts pointing into a fog. And they did that by returning to their roots of looking back at what the wisdom of those who had gone before in the faith had passed down to them, the prophets and whatnot. And then also working in community, making decisions in community. There's wisdom in the counsel of many. There's wisdom in community. And sometimes we overlook that for like our individual opinions, but we actually wrestling with it as local communities within the church is actually a very healthy thing that I think would set us up to be able to respond to the world outside with more wisdom.
Yeah, that's good. And I think it does. Basically, your opening was kind of like, hey, we got to clean up our witness a little bit out in the world, because we're out there dropping, memes of Bible verses that are somehow supposed to be shutting down some conversation, or
Right.
or being our protest against, and I think one of our challenges as Christians in general is that our voice in society is maybe not what it's definitely not what it used to be. And I think we've to some degree earned what we got. And so how do we step back and just start faithfully living this out? And I think in that and seeing how we respond, I would hope that there would be some in the world that would look and go, oh, the church is doing this a little bit differently. Like, what is it about that? Why is that working for them? This is my personality just in general. I'm just kind of like, I'm going to go about my business and do my thing my way. And if somebody notices me doing it and they want, please ask me, and I'll be happy to tell you why I do what I do. But otherwise, I'm not out here spouting, this is what I do and that's what I do. In as much as I just want to live a life that's faithful to who God is. And if somebody sees it along the way, I hope people see it along the way. And it's intriguing and points back to Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But I do think, like you say, if we can get together and we can talk through these things, because even listening to your book about AI and you kind of cover a whole bunch of different subjects there. And I love it that you're trying to create a framework for, like, we're just creating a framework for how we can approach it. And you may not like every nuance or every way that I'm applying it, but does that framework work? And then now how do we kind of continue to live it out? And knowing that it might adjust in 6 months and it might adjust in 5 years and it will definitely adjust in 50 years. Yeah. But that's also kind of the point of having a book of scripture that is timeless, that helps us when things that are not addressed in the Bible come into our world and we got to figure it out. Yeah. So there's a lot of different places where AI can be of benefit. And so let's start just in general how does this apply in the business world? We're going to get to church. I want to talk about kind of the church and some of those things. And I really want to talk about, discipleship relationships. So we'll get there real quick, but let's just kind of start in the business world. How is this benefiting? What are some pitfalls that you're seeing out there? Like, how does this affect kind of the day-to-day economy and some of those types of things?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the sector of business. There are tons of studies that are available on the internet that you can see of both predictions as well as some early indications of different fields that may be more disrupted than others by AI, adoption rates of AI use within particular fields, and some of the challenges. There was just one that in the field or in the legal sector, where a case was thrown out because the aides that had compiled some of the documentation that was submitted had used AI and had not done the hard work of checking and had sourced, erroneous information and made factual errors and things of that sort. But at the same time, there's a lot of concern of, AI robbing entry-level jobs that, as a young lawyer is getting into their career, that he or she may not be able to have because it's been outsourced and things of that sort. But there are, I think, automation and analysis, just in terms of general business, are two of the most promising areas for AI. Things like something as simple as Salesforce has an AI feature where you can create analyses based on the information that you have within your customer management model and things of that sort. In the area of marketing, something as simple as developing marketing personas and things of that variety are made very simple by ChatGPT. But then even being able to because a lot of people just assume, okay, well, ChatGPT always sources from, the entire internet and so forth. And so it's, that's good or that's bad, yada, yada. But there are different ways in which you can use not just ChatGPT, but other large language models where you can create it to where it only sources from a specific data set. Google has an AI application called Notebook LM that's devoted specifically for that. You can upload up to 50 PDFs, URLs, etc. And then it's a closed loop that just feeds off of that and allows you to analyze the information contained in therein, produce discussion guides, presentations, etc. And so a lot of that has just infinite use cases in business and marketing and so forth. Something as simple. I mean, I live, my wife and I run a consulting ministry for churches and seminaries and whatnot. And so the amount of slide decks that I have to create on a weekly basis is exhausting. But tools like Gamma.app do that, and Canva to a degree, but do that with just super, super quick ease. You upload your outline of whatever it is you're talking about, and it builds a skeleton for you. I don't know anybody that enjoys making slide decks, so that alone is a blessing to all of humankind. I actually saw somewhere that Steve Jobs was diametrically opposed to slide decks or PowerPoint presentations because he thought that they limited creativity. I'm hoping I get to a point where I can just stake my claim. Well, Steve Jobs thought this, so I'm not going to do slide decks anymore, kind of thing. But for now,
we'll see.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, there are so anyway. That's the efficiencies I think that businesses can gain, and it's interesting. I just read this today or yesterday that Amazon's laying off I think 30,000 people from in their kind of mid-level management, and it claims a lot of that's just because of AI automation and how they're gaining efficiencies from that. So anyway, so we'll see.
I will say this on that subject. I mentioned at the top that I come from Flint, Michigan, which at one time in the 1960s was one of the highest per capita income destinations in the country, because GM employed such a high percentage of the population. By the time I was born in the mid 80s, that had shrunk. And then I watched over the course of my childhood, deindustrialization and automation reduce the workforce from about 90,000 to 9,000, which is the last time I checked a couple of years ago. And so it had a catastrophic effect on the Flint economy. But at the same time, what it's produced in the long run, though disruptive, and we need to be attentive to that, it's produced resilience and it's produced adaptability that it's taken time for that economy locally to recover, but it has recovered and is continuing to recover. And so there's this way that economics kind of plays the long game, in the sense that AI will create probably more opportunities than it disrupts. But I think that in the short term, the difference is going to be made in terms of employability is not so much whether AI can take the job or not, but in people being hired that know how to use it well.
Yeah. Let's pivot over to the church. What place does AI have in the church right now? Let's talk about pastors. We're going to start with pastors. So sermon prep, sermon series, some of the things that a pastor would have to do. How can AI be a benefit, or what's a warning sign that maybe hey, that's maybe a place that you don't want to step into and use AI to support you there?
Yeah, I think anything that separates you from God or from people, or puts the AI application in the place of where you are to be in the presence of God or in the presence of people, is kind of a litmus for how it should not be used. So the idea that I should just simply let ChatGPT write my sermons, I think that that robs both the congregation as well as the pastor, who, I've been preaching for 25 years. I've done some wrestling with God in prayer over what I'm going to preach. And there's something beautiful that's cultivated within my heart that I don't want to sacrifice for the sake of expediency. That said, though, I actually think that AI has tremendous benefits in the sermon preparation process in the right spaces. So it makes for a great whiteboarder. If you don't know, if you're trying to look up a particular topic, it can give you, these are the experts in this field, or these are some books that I would recommend, et cetera. Logos has, some AI features even put into their Bible software that can help source information and stuff. It's great for being an editor and a check. Are you talking over people's heads? Do you need to kind of raise the bar and a little bit? Are there, questions of deliverability and things like it gives good feedback. But then on the tail end, I think one of the things that's probably most promising, just kind of short, low hanging fruit benefits for pastors and church leaders, is in multiplying the use of the sermon after it's done, after the fact. Things like Pulpit AI, Sermon Shots, and Opal, others give the ability to take that content and make it into social media ready reels or discussion guides for small groups, outlines for books, and to repurpose all of that work that is done between the pastor and the Lord, and to make it kind of reverberate beyond just the point at which it's delivered initially. The other space kind of adjacent to that is in the area of translation. Like if you live in a metropolitan area or an area where multiple languages are spoken, and you have a heart to reach people whose heart language is different, the ability for AI to accurately translate sermon information or written information expediently is really, really good, especially when we're talking kind of the Latin derivative languages or the Germanic languages. It can get choppy at times in like Hindi and Farsi and stuff like that. But like if you're translating something to Spanish, it's near flawless. And there's a lot of resources out there where you can translate stuff in real time, or video content after the fact and so forth. But yeah, I think that there's tons of kind of short-term stuff, especially in the sermon prepping process, that are really good, that aren't, I'm just letting ChatGPT write my sermons.
Yeah. Good. All right. So we're saying writing sermons, no. A resource for it, because you don't have to have all of your, Bible encyclopedia, your IVP, biblical studies for the Old Testament. You don't have to have those all open in front of you anymore. I've even put in like, I think it's a Psalm, and it's, here's a few words from it. And it's like, no, it ain't a Psalm, it's Jeremiah. And I think this is what you're looking for. And I'm like, dude, why does my Bible software not do that for me? Like I have to be very exact for my Bible software to give me the right verse. So let's talk about discipleship relationships. It seems to me like I could just, ChatGPT could be my small group guy, leader, help me put together all, my discipleship formational time with Jesus. How, again, so in that kind of formative, and I'll move that out to like parenting, discipleship, even education. What place does AI play in those kind of realms where it's very formative? And I am thinking about children, but we're all still forming. So for kind of all of us, what role does AI play kind of in those fields?
Yeah, I think if we look at something like education or discipleship purely as the communication of information and the assimilation of information, then ChatGPT can, with a relative degree of accuracy, replace the educator and the pastor. I don't think, though, that that's the fundamental role that either are intended to play. And this is actually one area where, especially Christian educators who generally don't go into education, especially in like a college level, for the research and the teaching is the annoying thing that you have to do on the side kind of thing. But it's really a calling. And, I had a professor in Bible college that gave up a job at Harvard to come teach, pastors in training. And I'm eternally grateful that he did that. But I think that there's this opportunity for us to shift to really a kind of more biblical approach to discipleship, to teaching, and even to parenting. And that is to cease being so much the guide or the sage on the stage, and toward being a guide on the side, of looking at discipleship, spiritual formation is not just the communication of religious doctrine. It is this all-encompassing dynamic that is actually more caught than it is even taught. And religious instruction is good. We need to learn theology. But when I think back on the most impactful moments that pastors have made on my life, it's not the great sermons. And I've heard some great sermons. It's been the pastor that, after our church plant had to close, spent a day with me, driving around Metro Detroit, visiting other pastors and stuff. It just spent the day together. There was no agenda. There was no outline, nothing to cover, but just presence. It's the hospital visits and the, baseball games and things of that sort that pastors, do, that really is more formative than anything that we might say from a pulpit. And the same is true in parenting. I have 3 girls. I've never sat them down at like a regularly scheduled time to instruct them in, the ways of life. Like, they watch me. And there are occasions that we have conversation, obviously, but so much of how they grow and mature is by the example that I set, for better or for worse. And so the same is true with educators, like having this comprehensive view that I think Christian educators are probably have a leg up versus their non-Christian counterparts, of seeing kind of the formation of the whole individual as a calling rather than just the information itself. But in the area of education in particular, there's a lot of really cool innovations that different organizations, companies are making to both improve the teaching of the professor as well as the assessing like how students are coming along in the learning process and stuff, to try to provide feedback, not for like disciplinary reasons or anything, but to try to enhance the learning experience. And that's actually just a recent kind of innovation that I've seen that's really promising, that I think stands to benefit everyone.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so sage on the stage versus guide on the side.
Yep.
I love that. And I think you stated it, and I'd say the same. Like, the most formative things have been those coffees, that working with somebody, that, just that togetherness, right? And it does want to push me to asking a little bit about relationship right now. We're closing up on time, but I do want to talk a little bit about, AI can be pretty friendly and encouraging and so on. My daughter wanted me to talk to you about Messiah psychosis that is encouraged by ChatGPT. So somebody who already has a Messiah complex, and then they get on, AI, and it encourages in them. I'm like, I'm not sure we're going to get to that today, but for anybody out there, there's a lot you can find out. My 20-year-old college-age daughter. So Messiah psychosis encouraged by, AI. Y'all look it up. Tell me what you think. But how does AI fit in our relational life? Because what you're talking about is human on human, guide on the side, and that we need. And yet there's a place where AI, it can be a relationship. It can be somebody who is there and encouraging you. And you've already said about CBT, or the cognitive behavioral therapy, helping people with their mental health. Like, so how do we navigate that? Do you have any kind of handholds for us to grab on that one? And before we get to our last couple questions here.
Yeah, I think that's one that I would pretty much stake my opinion that like direct like relationship bot kind of like interactions is something that is not ideal for children. That is like social media. We're kind of increasingly dogmatic about. Some countries are straight up banning social media use for children under a certain age. I think the same it needs to be considered for the use of chatbots and stuff like that, because they're still in a place where they're kind of developing a framework for what friendship and relationship even is. I think that in certain applications, it can have benefit. That now there are ways in which that same kind of technology can be applied even in Christian mission of using bots that are preloaded with certain data sets. One of the organizations I work for, One Hope, does that in our online missionary or like our online evangelism work, we have archetypal figures that have a profile of, and so the kind of course where or content that we develop, we interact with those bots. This is all behind the scenes, but we interact with those bots to help refine content to better resonate with people when we actually, make it public. And so those are some examples of how that's used well. I think, CBT, it can be a lifeline in situations where, as someone who's had anxiety and whatnot, that never comes when my, counselor is readily available. It's always like
Right.
the Sunday night doldrums kind of stuff or whatever. And so it can provide, a supplement there. But I think it's like with anything like nuclear power, recognizing that while it has tremendous benefit, it can be a great thing, it can also be catastrophic if used in the wrong way. And I think approaching it with that similar kind of reluctance, but kind of measuredness, it's not just kind of a fun thing to blow off steam or whatever. It has a legitimate application, but it can also bring you down a path that's not good. And I think anytime that you begin to feel a disorderedness in your soul, an anxiousness, or a desire to withdraw from others, it might be time to renegotiate your relationship with those kind of chatbots.
Yeah, that's good. That's helpful. All right. What are some of your favorite AI tools? Like, what are some things out there right now? You're like, man, my life would be very different anymore without this. So what are some of your favorite tools? And how do you use them in your own personal life?
Probably the one I use the most frequently is actually, and I wish they'd actually pay me an affiliate thing as often as I mention them. It's a project management software actually called Motion, not Notion, but Motion with an M. Notion's great too, just different program. But it's AI. It's AI powered, so it has agents that you can deploy to take meeting notes and stuff like that. But then it also reorganizes your calendar and to-dos and kind of keeps track of all of that. So I don't have to, which is really nice. I really like Google's Google Gemini and Notebook LM. Like those two products are just fantastic. Gemini is great in terms of like I travel a lot, and so it helps plan itineraries and things of that sort. They recently launched a photo editing software called Nano Banana that's embedded into it now that can clear up. Like I prepared a slide deck last week. I was speaking at a college, and I used a photo from the early 1920s, a play that was given then, and I had Nano Banana clean it up to a high def, just beautiful image. Something simple, but it saves me a lot of time having to hunt for something that's decent quality. Yeah. And then, truthfully, ChatGPT and Claude are, if you really kind of dig into, it's like, I liken it kind of like Microsoft Excel. Like Microsoft Excel, like if you know Excel, you can know Excel, like to get by, to be able to say it honestly on your, resume or whatever. Or there are people that like know Excel, like Excel is their life. And like they really they know the full range of it. And so ChatGPT and Claude have similar sorts of they're connectors you can add so you can link to different programs and stuff like that, which allows you to do you can schedule tasks and create projects and custom GPTs that are on closed data sets and stuff. So a lot of really cool things that you can do. And honestly, the best way to start out is just actually ask ChatGPT, teach me what you can do. There's actually a study and learn feature that I can just click and activate, and it'll teach you how to use ChatGPT, which is nice.
Oh, that's very cool. And I've mentioned ChatGPT a bunch of times. I use it, but I have never seen that one. Maybe I need to go back and make sure I'm using it right. So, all right. Last question for you. What is exciting you right now? What's something that when you think about, it makes you smile? It could have to do with AI, but it could be something in your family, a Bible verse you're reading, something you're doing this weekend. Just what's something in your life that's exciting you right now?
As funny as it sounds, given this conversation, what excites me right now is I feel like the Lord has been putting on my heart to walk slowly, in craziness of life, of current events, of the whole AI conversation, and it has the ability to just make life so rapid, and we're just moving from one thing to the next. We're never bored. We're always overstimulated and all of that kind of stuff. I have found like a real conviction to walk slowly with my kids, to like turn and be oriented toward my wife when I talk to her, and really take time to pause and to not be so concerned with striving of getting to the next thing or doing that. Like I've learned a lot over the last couple of years from our brothers and sisters in Africa and Latin America, whose relationship with time is much more relational. And it's challenged me to remember, and I talk about this in the book, like the way that we kind of like are mechanically enslaved to time is it's all a man-made construct. Like it's only existed for like 200 years. And so I don't have to be enslaved to the clock and my calendar. I can choose to walk slowly and to find meaning in creation and in the relationships around me.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm trying to learn the same thing, man. I'm trying. It's a
challenge.
It's a challenge. Well, then, like you say, you're brought up in a particular way, and you're brought up, and then you start a career, and it feels like, well, this is what I got to do to survive and thrive. And how am I going to write a book if I don't pay attention to the clock, right? Like, how's that ever going to happen? So I love that. That is really good. Well, Todd, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find stuff, find your book? Do you have any links or any websites, any URLs you want to give to people right now?
So you can find me at my own website, just toddkorpi.com. Or if you want to check out the work that my wife and I, Tara, do together, we have a website called anchorforward.com. And then you can find me on all the socials at Todd Korpi. So
okay, awesome.
That's the benefit of having a unique name, is I get the first dibs on the easy handle. So.
All right, Todd. Well, thank you for your time today. And for everybody out there, let's go live faith first. Hey, you're still there. That means you enjoyed the conversation with Todd Korpi. Wasn't that an awesome conversation? I enjoyed how he dug into AI. And this is unrelated to AI, but this is the one thing I want to know. What's one thing you can do today to slow down, to not be tied to the clock? I know, super hard. We are calendar people in this house, and everything has, down to the 5 minute, down to the 2 minute, but there's a place where the calendar can't necessarily drive everything. So is there one thing you can do today to say, I'm going to ignore the calendar, even if it's for just 5 minutes? All right, everybody, let's all live faith first.